It looks to me like we are now streaming live on YouTube. Do you
I
see
can't believe they'll still have us on this channel.
It's wild.
It just goes to show.
We are like, there's no lock on the door here.
No, it's wide open. Are we live?
I think we're live.
Fantastic.
Good to go.
I think that was a yes. I think that's Ivan behind the curtain saying we're live.
Oh, you mean the person doing all the real work today? Okay, good.
Matt, welcome to HR Leaders Live today. I'm so happy to have you.
Well, and I'm happy to have you as well.
Thank you. You know, before we jump into it, I just wanted to acknowledge that today you put on suspenders for the show.
Yeah, I think the look you're going for is dapper. That's what I was going for today.
You're very dapper today. It's feeling dapper to me.
Thank you.
Excellent. So Matt, before we get into it, you have just spent a couple of weeks in Nashville. Now you're in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a few secrets about what you've been doing?
Secrets? No, but I can tell you lots of other things. Yeah, I just finished my executive MBA in Nashville. It was a really great program. We had a chance to visit 4 international cities, first in Vancouver in August. We were in Sao Paulo, Brazil in October, Mexico City in January, and then most recently in Nashville, where we kind of brought it all together. It was really intense. So for those who had a chance to follow my journeys in Mexico City and Brazil, you'll know that I didn't post as much content through Nashville because I simply just did not have the time. We were working 20-hour days. It was long hours. And it culminated with essentially a timed pitch to a panel of venture capitalists. And from there, really just a lot of pressure around getting everything right. And as you can appreciate, we were competing with not only each other, but with ourselves. And that was an interesting experience. And then otherwise, I spent another couple of days down there just meeting with a number of folks in Nashville. Again, for those who followed, I'm filming a documentary called The Intersect, and we filmed the Nashville episode of that. And now that my MBA is finished, I'm excited to get my arms and hands into all the editing. I have 30 hours of content that I have to edit between Mexico City and Nashville. So folks who are interested and excited to see that stuff will be seeing it very shortly.
That's
and
awesome.
Then here in Toronto, I flew back to Vancouver for about 36 hours, had enough time to do laundry, and now I'm in Toronto for a few days. I'm attending the Great Place to Work conference here in Toronto. Actually, right after this call, I'm going to run out and head to a meeting at the Great Place to Work conference and have a chance to rub shoulders with some other HR leaders from around Canada and steal shamelessly all their secrets.
If any of those leaders are watching today, I hope that they caught on to that and they'll protect their secrets.
I'm bringing my pen and my paper. Yes.
Awesome.
How about yourself? What have you been doing the last couple of weeks?
Oh, wow. It's been a crazy, amazing few weeks for me. After 20 something years in the corporate world, I have decided to throw up my parachute and jump off that cliff. So it is probably the most exciting time in my career. I've spent so many years doing human resources, but in so many different companies. I've been in small startups. I've been in very, very large companies, and I've been in multiple industries. So I've had the chance to work in finance, in banking, in entertainment, in media, a lot in technology, and the past 13 years in retail and fashion. So Monday was my last day as a full-time employee at my company, who I love tremendously and will cheer on from the sidelines. But Assemble Human Resources Consulting is up and running, and this is it. So really, really exciting.
So what do you bring to the consulting space that other people don't?
Myself.
Well, I know that. What about you is different? I know, but...
Oh, yes, but we're going to tell all of our participants and our community. What I really love the best and what I've had the most experience doing is the organizational design work. So helping leaders build out their teams and really think strategically about how does the team I'm building support the operational model that we are working with. So there is a great amount of organization design and structure work. There is a whole group of work around transition, change management. Almost every organization today, I think, is going through some level of significant change and transition. And the people side of that, everything from how it's done, how the decisions are made, what the communication plans look like, and what the after work is, the continuous transition and support work is critical. So that's the second rubric. The third is company culture, employee experience, employee engagement. Anyone who knows me well, and certainly you, Matt, know that all of these issues are so close to my heart and important to me. And that's anything from work-life blend to working parenthood, caregivers, what attracts people to an organization, what employee branding is all about today, the marriage, as we've talked a lot about, between employee branding and marketing. And then fourth, a lot of executive coaching. I've been really fortunate, and I already have some really great clients that I'm learning as much from as well. So very, very excited about this work.
Very cool. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
When you go to your first meeting with a client, do you bring that hourglass with you that's behind you and tell them there's a time limit? Do you build by the hourglass?
I either bring the pineapple or the hourglass.
Which one's the good one?
The pineapple is to let them know that they're always welcome. Oh. The hourglass is, let's get to the important stuff. And my question for you is, what inspired the suspenders?
Well, people who know me well know that I have the maturity of an 8-year-old boy. So I thought I would dress like it.
I brought a gift for you, actually, because of that.
Oh, I like it.
Today I'm drinking from my Chewbacca mug. I thought that might make you happy.
I just realized we need to milk this call for all we possibly can while Chris is not here, because he's never going to let us come on ever again after this.
Never. This is it.
This is
it.
But all jokes aside, I thought it was a great idea just to have the two of us on today, because really we kicked off this show, a few months ago, and really never had a chance to introduce ourselves. We've talked a lot about our guests, and I've loved every minute of every guest we've ever spent time with. But I think individuals have been asking me, at least offline, and I'm sure you're much the same, a lot of questions about you. So, let's just spend the next 20 plus minutes getting to know each other a bit better and letting our audience know a bit more about us. And then I think we have Ivan in the background here helping us with questions that come in. So for folks that are listening and watching, by all means, send your questions into the show, send them into us live, or connect with us offline as well.
That's a great idea. I am going to start off with a question that was written in, and then I'm probably going to ask some questions to you.
Oh.
So we've gotten some really, really great questions. One question came in, and I'm not going to mention names because I want to protect people's anonymity in case that was important. But we have one person.
I can find you.
Say exactly. So this person, who's been a great supporter of our show, and so you know who you are, and we appreciate you so much, has asked us, as a new HR leader, particularly being new to a company, how can you facilitate authenticity and create a culture where employees who have been zoned out start to regain pride and become leaders? Is there a shortcut, or are there techniques which help us? Or is it simply the culmination of many one-on-one interactions for an HR team to always have great customer service and win over our team?
Well, I want to thank you for starting with a really easy question.
Could you just repeat it back to me?
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, if you can figure that out in any organization, you're going to have success. And that is a slow journey in most organizations, because that is counter to how most organizations have operated for the better part of 50 or 60 years. So you have to start small. And when I find there's a cultural change that needs to occur, and Jill, you know this with your practice, you need to start at the top. So it begins with your CEO and your C-suite team and convincing them about the values of authenticity, about the values of being transparent. And in a lot of cultures, especially in organizations that are private, where they don't have an obligation to share their information publicly, that can be really challenging. They are concerned about competitive advantage, giving away their secrets. They're concerned about intellectual property. And I think what I would say about that is intellectual property is today really critical if you have rights to a patent. So if you have patented technology, patented knowledge, of course, you want to keep that information to yourself and to your organization. But where a lot of leaders need to make a shift is that information today is ubiquitous. You can find anything anywhere, whether it's inside your organization, outside your organization. If I want to know how your company is doing, I can go on Glassdoor right now and find out. And I can find people on LinkedIn, reach out to them directly, and they're more than likely will talk to me about it. So there really aren't a lot of secrets per se in organizations. And I think leaders have to understand that by trying to keep things secret, they're actually creating a culture of mistrust and distrust. And if you signal to your employees that you don't trust them, then they in turn won't give you their trust. And especially for a millennial generation, that's what builds engagement. So for me, what we always try and do is we push on transparency, we push on authenticity as a means to build engagement. It's not always easy. I mean, we operate, Jill, in an industry where confidentiality is critical, and we have some legal obligations to individuals around privacy. For instance, if I'm doing an investigation on sexual harassment, I'm not publishing that in the company newsletter next month. At the same time, I will be very transparent about some of the behaviors that are acceptable and not acceptable, and talk a bit about what things we as a company stand for. And I will talk a bit about my own experiences in terms of what I value and what's important to me. But again, with striking that balance is critical. I don't know if that fully answered your question, but I would just start with that C-suite group, get an understanding of where they are with respect to transparency, because if you as an HR leader are trying to do this yourself, you will fail. There's just no, I can't be more explicit than that. You need the support of your C-suite team, and you need to work with them one-on-one. And that may take you 6 months. It may take you 12 months, but better to spend that time up front to get that alignment than to waste a bunch of effort in the first 6 or 12 months to build programs that are not going to resonate and they're not going to stay within your organization.
That's a great answer. And I really like the focus on the top, because it is such a truth that if the HR team is the team that's invested in building and driving an engagement or employee experience strategy, you don't really have a strategy. You really need it to come from the top. So that's great. We actually have a few more questions on that topic, but I want to take a quick left turn for a second. I want to know how you ended up in HR.
By accident. Long story. I was actually in operations. So I was in the operational business. And I realized one morning that I enjoyed P&L a lot more, people a lot more than P&L. And a bit of a confession. I actually, at the time, I decided that I didn't want to be in operations forever, but I wanted to be in another function of the business. So I actually applied on 2 jobs. One was in marketing and one was in HR. And I really wanted that marketing job, but they never called back. HR called back, and here we are.
And what is, if there's a listener today who is interested in going into HR, and you could reflect back on your entire HR career, what do you think is the one most important deciding factor for a person who's going to choose to go into this field?
Well, let me answer the question kind of in light of your last question. So I would say, here's what got me into HR, because I think a lot of people misconstrue what is required to get into our industry. So it will surprise people to hear perhaps that I had my first HR job with 0 HR experience and 0 HR education, like 0. What I had a demonstrated ability to do was to influence an operational audience. So when there was a temporary role posted for a business partner, they wanted somebody who can communicate the language of the business, but also convey HR pieces. And the secret, there's not really a big secret about HR practices. A lot of them are documented, whether it's employment legislation, whether it's company policies. So yes, you have to learn that information, but I think the harder skill to develop is, how do you influence an audience that frankly has no impetus to act on your direction, has no vested interest in your success or not? How do you move the needle with a group that is, their support for you is conditional? If you can demonstrate that, I can teach you the policies, I can teach you the legislation, show me the competencies that I can't teach. That's how I got into the industry. And then once I got into the industry, I turned out that I loved it. Like, I loved the ability to watch people grow and develop. I loved being put in situations where it was a little bit messy. I could never be in a role that's black and white or binary. I need the volatility. I need to know that every single day is a little bit different. Otherwise I get bored. So I fell into HR kind of by happenstance. But in the long run, I'm really glad with the choice that I made.
It's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So we did have a few people that wanted to know more about engagement. Someone who, actually, I'm going to name him because there's nothing here that I think is bad. Gabe Gurman from Career Place, who is a fantastic guy. And I'm not being paid to say this, but if Gabe is watching, we we really enjoy Gabe. He's a super smart guy. He has a great technology background, and he's been a great supporter of the show also. So Gabe, thank you for all of your questions and thoughts. Gabe was one of several people who wrote in asking for tips and tricks for retention. And so I thought that was kind of an interesting topic. And to me, I'm interested in your thoughts, Matt. I think that engagement, retention, experience, a lot of these things are kind of going into the same big stew these days. So if you think about no budget or shoestring budget, what are the first few ideas that come to your mind?
Well, in retail, and I'm going to ask you this question right after I finish answering, we don't have budgets. I mean, I've worked for some of the biggest retailers in the world that are known for their cost, their focus on cost, let's put it that way. So you often have to MacGyver a solution by tying things together with sticks and gum and just try and make a solution out of it. Unfortunately, what I say, what was most effective I found, and maybe I was an engineer in a past life, I break it down into a process and I break it down into modules, starting with how we acquire the employee all the way through to selection, to onboarding, orientation, training, and then sustaining that person's experience through the organization. And I look for pain points. And I do that through a couple different means. So I think HR has the market cornered on qualitative information. We can tell you where the problems are because we often hear the feedback from leaders and from people in the business units. But what our business lacks from us at times is that quantitative support that underpins the qualitative. I mean, if you go to a CEO and say that, Bill and Sally and Tammy don't like this part of the onboarding process because it makes them uncomfortable, you're not going to get very far in that conversation. But if you can say, hey, we've surveyed 150 people who've joined the company in the last 6 months, and 36% of them see a dip in engagement at the onboarding stage, okay, now we have a conversation we can start to have. So I break it into small pieces, and then I survey employees during each of those pieces. Just a quick survey, 3 to 5 questions. How is it going? What can we do better? What can we learn from this experience? Are you getting the support from your line manager? And then if we have certain questions that are answered certain ways, they trigger responses within the HR team for immediate response. But overall, we also review those answers on a monthly basis and look for potential trends. I mean, this in retail, each location is not built equally. Each leader is not built equally. So you do have peaks and valleys, and some people are still learning about how to manage employees, especially in a very dynamic retail environment. So we look for those trends, and then we lead with support. So if there is a gap in a certain location where we know that the onboarding is not successful and therefore the retention in the first 90 days is quite low, we will connect with that leader and ask them, do you need our support? What are you missing? Do you have all the tools that you need from HR, from the business to support a proper onboarding process? Do you understand the priority of onboarding relative to your success of your business? Do you understand that by turning people over, you're just repeating the same cycle and over and over again? So we have those conversations. And those, I would say 80% of the time, if not greater, that they have a huge impact, because most leaders get up in the morning, they really want to do a good job. Like they're just like you and I, they put on their pants one leg at a time, and they really want their people to respect them, and they want to do a good job, and they want to go home feeling that they did a good job. But there are a percentage of people, and it may not be 20%, maybe it's 5%, who, for whatever reason, don't prioritize the feedback of their employees because maybe they just simply can't handle one more input and they're overwhelmed, or in very rare cases, they just are indifferent to the feelings of their employees. In the latter case, those individuals shouldn't be leaders. They should be individual contributors. But in the former case, we need to help those leaders understand how to prioritize and remove some of those barriers that are preventing them from investing in their employees. So that's essentially what we do, is we follow that systematic process of phase by phase. And then where we see gaps, we try and engage a leader as fast as possible to give them the tools to be successful.
That's a great way to look at it. I like breaking it into chunks. It's a great way to, quite frankly, attack any problem that comes up in business, is to, take the whole thing, stop for a second, back up, break it into chunks, and really see where the breakdowns and opportunities are in each piece. I love that. That's great. I also thought about that, and sort of coming from the other angle, the emotional angle, is, to me, retention is just a really pretty word for relationships. And so to me, for someone who's asking about tricks for retention and engagement, I would tell a person, go look at the relationships that exist within your organization, specifically the relationships between your boss and your boss's direct reports. And so it is that boss providing constant growth opportunities for their person? Is that boss creating a relationship that, quite frankly, in this day and age, we're allowed to say it, is personal? I can't tell you how many times I've coached an executive and I ask them a basic question: how do you start a meeting? And in my experience, 9 times out of 10, bosses who start a meeting with business and not by asking something personal: how was your dinner last night with your friend? How was your daughter's birthday party? Did your horse run around the trail yesterday? Whatever's going on with somebody, if you miss that piece, you're not really building that relationship that matters the most. So as the boss gets to know you better and as it starts to care about you and your dreams and your goals, that person can better create growth opportunities and experiences for a person. And are you acknowledging and recognizing? So recognition has taken on, a life of its own. We should probably do a show on recognition. But recognition to me is tied so much to individual motivation. Every person really likes to be recognized in a different way. And this is something I like to talk about a lot with my clients, which is it is a common myth for managers to believe that their people want to be recognized in the same way that they do. So if I'm a person who is dying for a promotion and I want that promotion, I am more likely to believe that my direct report wants a promotion also, when in fact, that might not be what motivates this person at all. So recognition and motivation, I think, are really tied. And the way to get that answer, believe it or not, is the simplest question: asking a person what motivates you. How do you like to be recognized? So I really liked that question. Gabe, thank you for submitting that question to us.
I would just add 2 things to that, Jill. So I think the first thing is the big shift, along with this transparency, authenticity discussion we've had earlier with leaders, is let's not forget that even as early as 20 years ago, 15 years ago, it was quite acceptable to have a dynamic where the boss was clearly superior to the subordinate. We use those words, right? Like, if you're happy boss, you have a good career. Unhappy boss, you find yourselves without a job. The playing field is leveled now to where if you want to see an investment from your employees, you have to make it in your employees. So whereas before the employees would clamor for the attention and the approval of the boss, like a parent, that doesn't exist in most organizations nowadays. In fact, if you don't invest in your employees, they just check out. And they find other ways to engage themselves. And I promise you, it's not going to be what you want it to be. It might be on their phone when they're supposed to be working. Like they'll find other things to do. So in an era where trying to capture people's attention is very difficult, you have to give them a reason beyond just because you should or because you have to. That doesn't resonate with most people nowadays. So I think that's really, really critical. And I absolutely agree with what you're saying in terms of recognition. I think people tend to overcomplicate things. It doesn't need to be complicated, and it doesn't need to be, as a leader, people expect that you also are learning. So I think one thing that I say a lot with my team is, it's one thing that's very powerful for a leader is falling on your sword, which is showing people that you're a little bit vulnerable, showing people that you don't have all the answers. I think people respect that, because if you appear to be too perfect and too polished, you're not relatable. So if you go to somebody and say, hey, how would you like to be recognized, Jill? I think for some leaders, they might think, well, if I ask Jill that question, she might not think I know what I'm doing, and I don't know what to do. And I think quite the opposite. It shows a respect to say, I care about how you're going to respond to this, and therefore I want to understand for you what's the best way to get through and engage. And then at the same time, you can share what works best for you as a leader, because sometimes as a leader, it's very lonely, and it's nice to get recognition from your employees. And if you show them kind of how that relationship works, it becomes more of a peer-to-peer collaborative relationship and more of a flat organizational structure, and less about I'm the boss, so thou shalt.
That's a great point. That is great.
So, I mean, it's this. We've been on the call now for about 23 minutes, and I feel like you've asked me a lot of questions, and I feel like you're getting off really easy here. And I also see that hourglass is slowly ticking away, and I don't want to miss the chance to get in before the hourglass is up.
Go for it.
Okay. So why don't you walk me through your HR experience? So why did you choose HR?
My HR experience is wild. So I don't want to age myself on this show, but when I graduated college, there was no such thing as a major in HR. So a lot of people have asked me, did you major in HR? And I said, no, I majored in psychology and communications, because there was no such thing.
Mm.
When I graduated college, like you, I also went on to the business side. I did not go into HR. I didn't even know what it was. And I worked for a large global organization, basically doing advertising sales. And this was in the time when getting a job was not a struggle. Many years ago, and as we say, when I graduated college, jobs were falling out of the sky. And so it was really more a question of where did you want to work or what did you want to do? And so I took this sales assistant job, not exactly sure why, because I knew that building relationships was great. And I was, I don't know, 21, 22. And I thought, great, now I have a job. I can pay for a drink at the bar. And for me, that's typically a Diet Pepsi. So I got involved as a sales assistant in the recruiting effort that they had done for us. So every year they brought in a class of new recruits, and they were college graduates that we would wine and dine just as I had been wined and dined. And amazingly, in bringing them in, I wound up recruiting myself more college grads into our new rotational program than the entire HR department in that whole company.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, there's something to this. This is kind of interesting. And so I remember approaching the vice president of HR at that company and saying, I think I'd like to come into HR. I want to know what it's about. I realized that the relationship and psychology piece of what we're doing is far more interesting to me than actually the P&L, just like you. And her name and face are burned into my memory forever. And she said to me, no, Jill, we need you to stay on the sales side. And so I was all of 22, and that was just all I needed to go out into the marketplace and get a job in HR. And so I called a headhunter, which is what you did at that time. There was no such thing as an online job board. I actually remember looking in the newspaper. I just have really good skin.
Right.
And I landed my very first job as an HR coordinator to the global head of HR of a massive global bank. And I had just an unbelievable experience. In the beginning of my career, she had 12 vice presidents who worked for her, and each of them had an organization of about 100 to 200 people. And I got to liaise between this head of HR, the CHRO, and her 12 organizations. And it was just the best exposure opportunity. And from there, the dot-com bomb happened, or the dot-com boom before the bomb. And I went and ran HR for a web company, had amazing experience there, built up the New York office, the Los Angeles office, the LA office. And then unfortunately, after the boom came the bomb, and we closed that organization down. I then landed in media and entertainment, where I was the head of HR of a very large, well-known media company for about 3 years. And then I fell into fashion by accident. And I've spent the past 13 years leading pretty large HR teams in very large fashion companies. Most recently, as everybody probably knows, I was one of the heads of HR at Macy's, which is a very well-known retailer in the United States. And it was an amazing experience. So I have loved every second of my experience. And, the more I think about it, and I wonder if you see it the same way, Matt, I've always been in HR, but I think that HR experience really is more and more today just business experience. We're just business operators. We're just working on the people.
Yeah, I actually spend probably 80% of my time with the business and only 20% with the actual HR team, because ultimately the business is the customer. So in the same way, when you're the operational group, you want to spend as much time with that customer because they're driving revenue. And as an HR practitioner, you want to spend as much time with the individuals who are helping support your customer so that you can drive that revenue. So I agree with you. I think, business knowledge is absolutely essential. And those practitioners that kind of thumb their nose up at understanding the business and see it as kind of, perhaps, the dirty work for whatever reason, that's the business, and that's what pays our salaries, and that ultimately is the impact that you have. And I don't know how you can have a really solid impact in developing the next generation of leaders or developing the current generation of leaders in your business if you don't understand what they go through on a day-to-day basis.
I couldn't agree more. What's unbelievable, Matt, is I just checked my clock for a moment and I realized it is 29 minutes past the hour. Do you need to run to your big meeting?
I have one question for you first.
Okay.
So you've been in the HR field for, clearly you started when you were 6 years old. So like 20, so like, a number of years like myself. And the question I get the most on LinkedIn, besides the questions about my hair and suspenders, of course, is for the next generation of HR leaders, what are one or two competencies, what are one or two qualities that you think are critical for that new grad coming out of NYU or Stanford and Northwestern that's 22, 23 years old, hopping into an HR department? What is one or two things that you would say would help them have success? And maybe how is that different than when you started in HR?
I'm glad you asked. It's a great question. And when Chris originally interviewed me, he asked me this question. We talked about what I thought were the most important skills of an HR leader. I would say the two most important are relationship building and bravery. I think that when I graduated college just a couple of years ago, there were so many more foundational expectations of HR. And so, I did have the good fortune in my career of being taught all the pieces of HR that I now consider to be table stakes, which are the laws, the rules, the regulations, what it means to go through a coaching process with a person, what performance management's about, how to go through succession planning, what that actually looks like, what's a 9-box grid. So a lot of the tools that we use as HR people. But I would agree, Matt, 100% with what you've said, that all of that can be learned. Those are all skills, and skills can be taught. To me, the true talent in an HR leader of the future will be the people who can build very, very strong, trusting, credible, business-oriented, strategic relationships. And that's not something that can really be taught. That is something that is quite natural. It's a real talent, and it takes a lot of work. And the second piece is bravery. And again, that can't be taught. But today, what we need from HR, we need HR to be, as I often say to people, the flashlight that goes in front of everybody else in the dark cave and helps people shine light on what they need to see or haven't seen before, and be unafraid to do it and unafraid to go through that process with a leader to help us break through walls and help us get our organizations to the next level. So for me, relationship building and bravery are probably the two most important magical components to the formula that creates an amazing HR leader of the future.
Love that answer.
What about you? I can't let you go without answering that.
I mean, I could just log off the computer and you wouldn't know any different.
Oh, I would know because I'd be talking to myself.
And that's different.
Good point. Oh, no, good point. Yeah, you can go. I'll be fine.
No, I'll be fair. So I think the two things for me is, and I think about this a lot, and for me, it continues to evolve. But one pattern that comes up over and over again is it's actually a 3-stage process. So can you synthesize complex information into a simple concept? Mm-hmm. Can you tell it and put it into a story? And can you sell it to your business? Because a lot of times we have more information than we know what to do with in HR, whether that's quantitative information in terms of reporting and scorecards and metrics, and then all the qualitative in terms of all the people that we talk to, whether it's that hallway conversation, that water cooler chat, that open door meeting that you've had in confidence. We have a lot of data inputs, and the ability to concisely wrap up all of that information into something that you can take to your senior leadership team, to your CEO, to your board in a digestible piece, and then use it to drive action or drive an action out of that feedback is really critical. I mean, I know people in HR who are great analysts that are great at synthesizing. I know great storytellers in HR. And I know people that are really good at conveying and selling their ideas. But to have all three of those together is really powerful, especially for like a CHRO level individual. So if you have one or more of those skills today, that's great. I would really encourage the next generation of leaders to develop the other ones, because I think in today's world where most transactional tasks that Jill, you and I started doing, paper-based filing, submitting claims for occupational injuries, all that work is being automated. So what differentiates the HR professional in the future is emotional intelligence. And by the way, it's exactly the same skill that's going to differentiate leaders in the future is emotional intelligence. So, it's a really, to your point, it's a really hard skill to develop over a weekend. It takes time. It takes experience. It takes throwing yourself at a number of different opportunities. And I'm at the very cusp of millennial Gen X of that generation. So I get people ask me, Matt, how did you have success early in your career at a young age, at a time when most people are saying you need to be 40, you need to be 50 to get a certain level in the position? And my secret to my success is I threw myself at every possible opportunity to learn. So if there was a situation that was maybe not the most glamorous, but would give me a great opportunity to learn something, I always said yes, because I knew that no matter how successful I was in that opportunity, that I would learn something from it that I could apply in my career. And emotional intelligence to me didn't always come easily. So when you're a new practitioner, you're often rewarded based on being a strong individual contributor. And it's really difficult to transition from being an individual contributor into now being somebody who is a leader. You have to develop those skills through experience. So I think, again, so that really does tie into my second piece. I've kind of explained it before I defined it, which is having that learning mindset. Never stop learning. You're never finished. I just finished an MBA on Thursday of last week. I'm now learning Portuguese. Like, you have to keep growing skills, because in today's global world, information is out there. You can learn an MBA curriculum off of the internet for free. So you need to find ways to differentiate yourself. You need to find ways to stay engaged and to grow your knowledge. And people that have that learning mindset, I find, have a lot of success.
Fantastic. So Matt, should we ask Ivan if there are any questions that have been hanging on the line before we go?
Sure.
Hey there. Yes, I've been monitoring the YouTube, and we've got another great question actually from Gabriel, who dropped some good ones at the start of the podcast. Let's look. I can read that out to you. He says, tough one, Starbucks training day. In your careers, have you seen positive results from biases, diversity training? Can we really train people to get bias out of the workplace?
I'm going to answer this question, Jill, and then I'm going to have to run. Otherwise, I'm going to be late for a meeting. And in retail, if you're late,
not a good idea. You answer and then you can drop.
So first off, thanks, Gabe, for the question. I think the majority of diversity and inclusion training is a joke. I think that it focuses on all the wrong attributes. Bias, and particularly bias that's driven by race or gender or sexual orientation, that's really deeply held beliefs. Now, I'm fortunate in that I live in a country, Canada, where we are very inclusive, where we don't care about how you identify yourself. We accept everyone equally. That isn't the case in a lot of places. So I don't spend a lot of time trying to convince people to shift their values. However, I do spend a lot of time communicating and telegraphing what's acceptable conduct within this corporate culture. So, within our organization, we don't tolerate any form of discrimination. I have a zero tolerance policy. In the same way, when it comes to sexual harassment, zero tolerance policy. We just don't put up with it. We are very clear that for us, it is binary. It's black and white. If you do it, you don't have a job anymore with our organization because you're not a fit for our culture. So, in terms of diversity and inclusion training, I think it's more about broadcasting and telegraphing expectations and then letting people self-select in or self-select out of the organizational culture based on that. I don't spend a lot of energy trying to convince people to be different, but rather define what I believe success looks like.
It's a great answer. Matt, should we gracefully let you go?
Are you going to trash me when I leave? Okay. I can't wait to see the recording later. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for joining us.
It was a pleasure. Let's not invite Chris back next week.
I know, it's so great when it's just us.
Well, Ivan too. Like it's amazing.
It's great. Ivan, you were a fantastic partner today. And I should say, for those who are watching, please, we would love to hear your comments, particularly if your comment is that the show is just better when it's us.
Yeah. You have my vote.
Awesome.
Bye, everyone.
Take care, Matt.